We are live. Wow. So ordinarily on this channel, as y'all know, we like to talk a lot of politics. We like to talk a lot of Andrew Yang and Yang Gang stuff. So today is a very special treat for me because I get the best of both worlds. So we're gonna talk some UFC 251 and UFC Fight Island. And I'm gonna go ahead and bring on our guest. Bill Hodder. How are you today, bro?
I'm doing all right, Russell. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for being here. So I want to give a special shout out to Andrew for actually helping to facilitate this because, you know, I love the UFC. Okay, I'm just a UFC nut, and I'm a little bit nervous today, and I guess that's because when I'm talking to my wife, I sound like a fight expert. But I want you to give everybody a little bit of your background.
Sure. So my first real job, I like to tell people, is I was a professional hockey player. So I played hockey in Europe for a couple years, and it wasn't really a full-time job. And when I moved to California in the mid '90s, I kind of thought I was a tough guy, and UFC had just started. And this is back when they actually had the yellow pages. So you can tell how long ago this was. I looked at the yellow pages under jiu-jitsu, and there was a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy only a couple miles away. So in 1996, was that 24 years ago, I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Cesar Gracie, and I've never left the team. I've been a Gracie fighter member for 24 years. I got my black belt in 2011, and I've competed. I've won some big tournaments, but being a member of that team is really something that's been a huge part of my life. And it just so happens that some big name UFC people that I've gotten my butt kicked by. So, of course, Nathan Diaz and Nick Diaz, Jake Shields and Gilbert Melendez. But even going back into the late '90s, when Gil Castillo was fighting in the UFC and Dave Terrell was fighting in the UFC, and Leslie Smith, who is a recent UFC fighter and a very dear and great friend, is how I actually learned about Andrew Yang. So he tweeted support for Leslie 2 years ago when she was trying to start a union for UFC fighters, and that it's called Project Spearhead. And I had been a supporter of Leslie, since the first time that she showed up at our academy. I think it was like about 10 years ago as a white belt. The sweetest, most humble human being on the planet, but also someone that you would never want to mess with, right? So exactly. So when I first met Andrew, that's what I was talking about. Like MMA fighters, UFC fighters. It's not an easy life, obviously. Getting punched in the face for a living. But I know a lot of fighter athletes that are really struggling. I have friends that were fighting for a couple $100 or sometimes nothing. No health insurance, obviously, no pension, no long-term job prospects. So over the years, I'm a fan of the athlete, right? So like when I'm watching a UFC, I'm always rooting for the athlete, right? Like yes, as a fan, I can see where the UFC is going as far as how they want to promote it, and you get the guys in the audience that just want to see people get knocked out and bleed, right? So like in my mind, I'm like, I would love to see a great grappling match. I know that's not what sells tickets and puts people in the seat, but for me, I think martial art is an art, right? That's why they have the art at the end. So there's a lot of skill in what these athletes are doing. There's a lot of like heart and grit and determination. And now, like I worry about my teammates, but I also am their supporter, right? So I'm a kindergarten teacher. So like I don't that's a tough job, but like I don't get punched in the face all the time. So, and I focus mainly on jujitsu, but I will get in the. I've gotten in the ring over the years, and I just tell the fighters, just don't hit me. Like I'll do some MMA as long as you don't hit me too hard in the head, because I need my brains when I'm working with these little 5-year-olds. But anyway, that's kind of a long introduction to to the UFC
That's
experience.
that's great though, because like we were trying to have Leslie on, and I'm sure we will at some point to talk about Project Spearhead. And I think that's very important. And I don't think people realize just exactly, how passionate, number one, you have to be to even be involved in this sport. Because, you know, I, I like to think of myself as being able to handle myself in a fight if somebody was to bother me or my family or something like that. But honestly, I haven't been in any fights since high school. So, you know, and it takes I hate getting punched in the face, and
Yeah.
that is it. But and I think like back in the early days when I was watching the UFC, I can remember a period of time when fans would boo, like when it was a jiu-jitsu match or a grappling match. But I think as the years have evolved, man, and people have seen the sport grow, there's nothing I like more than seeing two people who are really, really good at jujitsu and just
Yeah.
roll and transition. Man, it is so beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's so artistic and just like wow, it's like joint manipulation and like bam, all of a sudden now this guy's on top. It's like what the hell just happened?
Exactly.
To me that's amazing, and it's something that I love to watch. So, and I think that there's a lot of people out there who are like me.
Yeah.
But one thing that's on my bucket list, and I want you to tell me how realistic my chances are, because I'm going to hit 45 this year, right? But one of my bucket list items is to fight in a cage just one time. I don't care if it's against an amateur. I don't care who it's against. As long as I don't get beat up too bad and they stop it if I'm getting whooped. But like, how realistic are my chances of getting inside of a cage and just like,
Actually, they're very realistic. I mean, there are people that show up at our jiu-jitsu academies, and that's what they want to do. Like, they want to fight in a cage, amateur or professional. But I always, I would always, I highly recommend training for it. Don't just,
well, sure, for sure.
don't just show up, and you'll find out. So I'm sure, like these days, well, with the pandemic, training is very hard right now. So, and there, a lot of places are shut down, and a lot of places are not accepting new students. But I'm sure where do you live? You're in you're in the East Coast, right?
Unfortunately, I live in Vermont, man. There's not
Yeah.
much around here.
Yeah. So like if you find like a local academy, or even like maybe an hour away, like we used to like literally, like Nick and Nate Diaz, they used to travel like an hour and a half each way to come to our academy in the early 2000s. So back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there just were not many jiu-jitsu academies or boxing or MMA academies whatsoever. But yeah, like you could go for it, man. Like, yeah, it's like once once you get in there though, you gotta see how your jujitsu game is, like get in the cage, get in the ring, have someone throw punches at you, like see how it feels. You gotta get hit once in a while. Like I had like jujitsu, there's no striking, right? So that's why it's called the gentle art, right? Like I can take you down and finish a fight without hurting you. But once you get into the striking arts, if you like some Muay Thai or just some like kickboxing or boxing, take a knee to the gut, like that hurts, or
Oh,
like take a leg kick. Like if someone knows how to give a leg kick and they put their shin on your thigh, that really hurts, man. That really hurts. And then once you start worrying about your lower body, and then your upper body, it becomes vulnerable. So yeah, go in, practice. Yeah, you can do it. just be careful. Like, just be careful.
Well, it's not like they could do much to my front teeth. That my front teeth are already jacked up. So I mean, what the hell?
These are false. These are from my hockey days. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. All of those got knocked out during my hockey career. Plus, like, I broke my nose 3 times. I've got like 65 stitches in my face. I broke my knuckle on a bad punch. I've got a broken toe, broken leg, separated shoulder, knee surgery. But I'm still training though. Like, they just put a bunch of glue and duct tape on me. I'm still going.
Well, see, I kind of think that there's something fishy going on because honestly, you remind me a lot of the dude off of Breaking Bad, and you say that you're a kindergarten teacher, but I secretly think that you're a hitman, and
Yeah, so I like to tell people, you know, I work. I have a lot of side jobs. I do a lot of volunteer work. So, and I've got a wide skill set. So,
so before we get in, and I'm like we're 11 minutes in, and we haven't even talked about the card that's coming up yet, because like it's very rare that I get the opportunity to just sit and talk about the UFC, and because this is a passion of mine. I've loved it since I saw the first. It was on VCR tape, and then I ended up going to the one in Charlotte, and it was Royce Gracie versus Ken Shamrock in the super fight.
oh yeah,
And Oleg Taktarov fought in that
yeah,
one. And I mean,
yeah.
it's just like Keith Hackney was there. He wasn't
Keith
fighting
Hack.
that night, but he was there. And it was so cool just to see the early days of the UFC and to see like how it evolved into this what we have today. And a lot of credit has to go to Dana White because you know he was on this for a long time and he saw the vision and unfortunately now he's got to work for his corporate masters, you know,
Right,
but you
right.
know, you can't take away what he's done to help build this sport. And the family that you mentioned, the Gracies, I mean, without the Gracies, this sport would not be where it is today. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So I think the first UFC came out in 93 or 94, I think so. And I had heard about it, but I had never seen it. And I I've wound up the first UFC that I saw was the one where Tank Abbott knocked out that guy Matua. Do you remember that one where he, like, the guy
Yes.
was like kind of, and in that moment, like, I
Was it Scott
realized
Perozzo?
it wasn't the Feroza fight. It was the guy Matua, I think was his last name.
Okay,
And I
okay, okay.
and I remember, like, Tank in the in the interview part, he said, "Put all your women and children away," because there's going to be a lot of violence tonight. Or he said something like this, and I was like, "Man, like, because I always felt, you know, as a hockey player, you know, as like kind of like an enforcer, you kind of have to have this idea that, like, no one can take you, right? Like, I got to be like the toughest guy." And after listening to Tank talk, I was like, okay, I'm kind of afraid of this guy. So I better learn. I better learn how to fight more than just on skates, right? Because I don't think he's going to attack me on a skating rink with skates on. So I better learn. So with Caesar, and Caesar's a good friend of mine, and I've known him for 24 years now. And he's considered like the godfather of jiu-jitsu in Northern California. So we were one of the first academies, you know, in Northern California, one of them. And I didn't even realize at that time that I was hanging out with some people that would go on to later be super famous. I like to tell people BJ Penn and I were white belts together. So you know who BJ Penn is, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So I'll just tell you, I know we got to get to this fight, but I'll tell you a quick story. I never really got to know BJ very well because he was with Half, and Half and Caesar split up in the late 90s. But there was a tournament in 1997. It was my very first jiu-jitsu tournament, and BJ Penn and I were both white belts, and there was no white belt division. So Caesar and Half, they came up to me and BJ and they gave us blue belts just for that day. And they said, you are not a blue belt, but today you got to be a blue belt. I wound up making it to the finals. I got a silver medal. And BJ, he ran the gauntlet. He beat everyone and won. And he got to keep his blue belt. And then when I got back to the academy after the tournament, Caesar's like, "You're not a blue belt." He put my white belt back on. I
Oh,
a white belt for like 3 or 4 more months. But
oh,
yeah. So like back in the day, like I didn't know that like BJ would go on to be, like super famous
a
and
monster.
yeah, Hall of Fame fighter. Um, so so I was just kind of, no one talked about it. It was kind of like Fight Club. Like as a teacher, I would go into class and sometimes I'd have like, bruised eye or some scar. And they'd be like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Oh, I do martial arts." I wouldn't say jujitsu. I wouldn't say MMA. I would just say martial arts. And everyone just kind of thought that I did karate or kung fu or tai chi or something, And so it was just on the down low. Like I didn't want to tell anybody. So as it started getting more popular, we went through a phase where it was banned. If you remember, like in the late '90s, I
Yep.
took some time. I took some time off. That was when John McCain called it human cockfighting, and
Yep. I remember.
a lot of state athletic boards banned it. So I thought, okay, it's over. I just thought it was like a little phase, and so I started doing other sports. I was like started playing softball, like kind of like normal. Was like mountain biking,
Oh
and then
man, you went normie.
I went normie for a little bit, and then I was at a party and I met a guy who I became really good friends with, and he was telling me, he's like, "Oh yeah, we got these new people, Nick Diaz and Jake Shields," and I had no idea who they were.
Oh
I knew
man.
I knew who Dave Terrell was. And then like I showed up at the academy and there's, Nick and Nate and I just became like one of the guys, just getting my butt kicked by these guys. Um, so I know you asked me about like Dana. So I kind of have like a love-hate idea in my mind with him because I know that he's done a lot for the sport. I want him to do more for the athletes, and like when Leslie comes on, she'll have probably this, a better way of explaining. I just know that I have a lot of dedicated teammates that work their butt off all day, all night, right? And they're super motivated and they're very passionate about what they do. Even people with good degrees. I know someone who, he was a veteran, he was in Iraq, and he had a degree, and he could have got a job making good money, but he didn't want it. He said fighting is the only thing that keeps him sane. So just imagine what, a universal basic income would do for a fighter, who's up and coming, who wants to become a fighter, but, is it economically feasible? It's not for a lot of people. I mean, if you want to be a professional mixed martial artist, you're gonna take a beating, right? And how long can you take a beating? Like when I see people fighting beyond like 3 or 4 concussions, like I'm worried. I'm worried about them. So I'm still I'm still a fan, but I'm more like I support my teammates. When Leslie's out there or Nate's out there, Gilbert Melendez or Jake Shields, or any of the up and coming fighters that no one knows yet. Like I want to support them 100%. And I don't know. Sometimes like I get a little down about Dana and the UFC just because it's gone corporate now. Like
Yep.
Reebok gets in there, and now the fighters can't even get sponsors to pay them. But I'm still here. I still watch it, even though like I'm not 100% behind Dana and in the UFC.
That's because you're in the trenches and you see what's going on. And it's like that in every business. It seems like eventually everybody has to sell out to the corporate masters, and unfortunately, that's our government is no different now.
Yeah,
And then when somebody like Andrew Yang comes along, he's so refreshing and so he has a vision for the country. And you're like, wow, you know what? If we did it this way, then everybody would benefit. You
yeah,
think about all those UFC fighters, and I mean, not even UFC fighters, just fighters in general, who, like you said, are struggling to try to put food on the table. A universal basic income would go so far, and it's not just those artists; it's every artist. It's
exactly.
musicians, it's
Yep.
painters, it's poets. If we had a universal basic income in this country, I believe that you would see a renaissance in all of the art forms.
I agree. 100%. I agree. 100%. I had a friend. I went and watched him fight in a local fight organization, and he won. He had a great fight. He won by TKO, and he got a $700 payout. And they gave him a check, and he just was like not used to like having money, and like he crumpled up this check and he put it in his pocket while we were watching some more fights, and he just kept on taking it out and looking at it, and like he couldn't believe that he had $700. And I was just thinking, every time I saw him take it out and look at it, I was just a little sad, because $700 is nothing, right? Like, just $700 doesn't pay your trainer, it doesn't pay your mat fees, it doesn't pay all the nutrition and exercise and your everything that you had to sacrifice to put yourself in a position to get in a cage and fight somebody, and you win and you make $700. It just it's heartbreaking. And these people are true artists, like you said, like musicians and poets and other athletes. There's artistry involved. There's a lot of there's dedication, and you cannot become a fighter unless you really want to do it. Like these people are like putting themselves through hell, on a day-to-day basis, in hopes of someday getting in a cage and fighting. And I tell you, like, sometimes it's heartbreaking, and this is the same guy. Like, he rode his bike to practice every day. Some days he was sleeping on the mats. Like, so there's a lot of people that are suffering economically that want to become fighters. And if they did have a universal basic income and healthcare, they could pursue their dreams further, right? Like, some people, like, okay, I'm not going to make it. I'm going to be a middle tier fighter making, barely enough to survive without healthcare. Like, you can't start a family with that. You can't buy a house with that. You can't go on vacation with that. So, yeah, universal basic income would do a lot for artists, including martial artists, 100%.
And once again, I want to shout out to Andrew Yang for helping make this show today. It was kind of a last minute thing, and he helped make it a reality. But before we get
Andrew.
into this main card, I want to talk for a second. Like, how did you get involved with Andrew? Because I remember seeing you when I went to Iowa. It was
Yeah.
at one of the events, and I had come out, and you were coming off the bus, I believe. And I was like, man, I just want to take a picture. And you were like, yeah, go ahead. Everybody else is doing
Yeah, I
it.
remember that. I remember that. So, actually, we're coming up on a 2-year anniversary. So 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, is his first tweet that supported Leslie. And so when I looked and saw who he was, I thought, okay, I'm going to follow this guy because he's supporting Leslie. Now, I had already, as a kindergarten teacher, worrying about the future economy. I had already been worried about the effect of automation and what was the effect automation was going to have on the future workforce. And I thought universal basic income would have been, is a good idea to help solve this problem. And so it just was like right away, hey, how are you?
We just got bombed.
so so then he happened to be in San Francisco. I already got his book. I read his book within a day, and I met him, and the first thing he said to me is like, he was like, "Oh, you're my Twitter friend, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah," because I was supporting him like on Twitter, just years ago. And so then so we're sitting around on like a board table, like a boardroom. There are like 10 people, maybe 12 people. And I think most of the people there were Venture for America people that he was working with. And I got to ask him all the questions that people that I wound up answering, for the past 2 years. Won't it cause inflation? What won't you guess? Someone that's just going to stay in their mom's basement and play video games? All of like the questions about universal basic income that people had, like that I had at that moment. He answered them specifically to me. I was like, wow. And so I said, yeah, I want to get involved. And so he connected me with the campaign. I started a Yang gang, the Martinez Yang gang, which was one of the first in Northern California. And then we had tabling events, and I worked with the San Francisco and Oakland Yang gang to. We did the first rally. I helped with the first rally in San Francisco, and then I had I helped put on a fundraising dinner for the biotech engineers of Silicon Valley. We raised close to $15,000 for a fundraising party, and that was the night that I became like in a lot of memes came out because I showed him how to do a rear naked choke. So have you seen those pictures? Have you seen the pictures? Yeah. So that was the night. So Leslie was there, and it was a great party. And I said, Andrew, we're going to show you how to do a choke. I did not think that I would become memed like for years, for the past 2 years after that, or maybe a year and a half. So, and then I just like kept volunteering. And I knew, so I had taken this year off. I was on a sabbatical, 27 countries in the last year. And I wanted to, I knew that Iowa was going to be something that I wanted to experience in January. So I had planned, I got a Airbnb for the month of January in Iowa, in Des Moines. I played hockey in Des Moines. It's another story. So I got a lot of stories. And so I was there just canvassing and, just kept volunteering. And then they needed a driver. So Lacey Delane, if you know who she is, she called me up and said, hey, they need a driver for the SUV following the bus for 19 days. And I was like, I'm in. And it was like the very next day, like I had to like get up the next morning, and I wound up driving like 5,000 miles throughout Iowa following the bus. Basically it was like I was a part of the advance team. So getting food and getting dry cleaning and then when Andrew said, Bill, you're my bodyguard, like if you've seen that picture, probably, right?
I have, and I was going to ask you about that picture because it was very emotional.
Well, it was so Andrew, like I had seen Andrew maybe like 6 times, and hung out with him, before Iowa. So we knew who, I knew who he was, he knew who I was, and we talked about MMA and Leslie and the UFC. And then one night we were in Des Moines, and we were in a hotel room. He was getting ready to speak, and he came up to me, like he crossed the room, and he's like, Bill, do you remember the Bodyguard movie? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like with Kevin Costner. He's like, yeah, and Whitney Houston. I'm like, yeah, I remember. He's like, you're my bodyguard. He goes, let's recreate that scene. I'm like, okay. So we walked to where they were getting pictures, and there's like a bunch of press and people. I don't even know who was in there, but everyone's trying to get his attention, right? And he's poor Zach. Zach looks at me. He's like, Bill, what are we doing? So he jumps in my arms, and the first picture Zach takes, but Andrew is sprawled out, right? He's like sprawled, so it's hard to hold him because he's like his legs are everywhere. And so so we take the picture, and I'm like, okay, like as I go off to the side because I'm just trying to get out of the way, like they're busy. Like I drove, like I did my job. I'm just sitting here, and as we're walking him out, getting ready, he's on his phone and he's like, Bill, we messed it up. I'm like, what? He's like this isn't how the picture's supposed to look, because I'm supposed to cradle him, right? He's supposed to be like in the fetal position. And he's like, let's redo it. And everyone was like, oh, we'll do it afterwards. And Andrew's like, no, let's do it right now. So we go back, and Zach's looking at me again. And he's like, he says, after he takes the picture, he's like, we're not tweeting this out, Bill. I'm like, that's cool. Like, we don't need to tweet it. Like, I don't want to
Yeah,
get
right.
everything.
It's going viral.
So like the rest of the night, I just was like, okay, like that was fun, but like I'm fine. It doesn't have to get tweeted. The next morning, I'm driving. My phone is just like blowing up, right? Because they tweeted it out, and we got to the next spot for him to speak, and he came out, and he was like, yeah, he's like, we tweeted, and Zach was like, yeah, it's okay. Because like he had to check, like Eric Sanchez was in there and Zach, so they all had to look at it and make sure that it was cool. And so it was
And that's Zach had his hands full during that campaign because Andrew is Andrew, right? Andrew
yeah,
he's a goofball and
yeah.
he loves to have fun and he loves to, just be real. That's the way he is. And he doesn't really think about like the consequences sometimes of what he's doing on a much larger scale. And I can remember Zach many times through the campaign. He was just like, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh." He was like a mother hen, but he was great. He did a great job for Andrew, I thought. You
Oh
know.
yeah, yeah. Zach was like the mother of the campaign. Like, so he he kept Andrew in line, and I definitely like appreciate what Zach and the rest of the campaign did, because, and I tell people this too, that it's not that Andrew is childish, it's that he's childlike, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Like he has just this kind of like open, friendly demeanor, and like he's very welcoming.
Mhm.
Like it's hard, he doesn't even want to stop talking to people. Like he will just keep talking to people, and Zach has got to be like, no, we got to go, let's go, so they were a great team, and they still are a great team. And we need people like Zach, right? And Andrew. That's like, you need both types of personalities. You need someone who's going to push the limits, and you need someone to kind of rein you back in. And that's what I'm like that too. Like, as a kindergarten teacher, like sometimes I feel like I have more in common with 5-year-olds than a lot of adults, because my mind is open, like my mind is just curious and thoughtful. And, but I sometimes I have blind spots, right? And I think sometimes like Andrew has that too. And, we need people like Zach, watching out for us for sure. 100%.
That's because adults are stupid, man. I mean, it's just crazy. It's like I look at and even in the Yang Gang now, I see so much division and so much strife because everybody's falling back to their camps. But like what I feel like the Yang Gang has to understand is this isn't over. This
Oh,
wave is just beginning, and we're just building it up now. And it's going to be a fight, and it's going to be an uphill struggle.
yeah, and I'm still going. So like I'm a volunteer for Humanity Forward right now. So I'm on the COVID relief volunteer call. So I call people that applied for the $250 micro grant through Humanity Forward. Like I call them and help facilitate those grants being sent out. So yeah, we're still fighting, like, and it's, they say, quote, fighting, but it's really fighting. I mean, it's hard. You get beat up, and you just got to get back up and keep fighting. So so I'm going to be fighting. I'm not done. I'm not done fighting at all.
That's
Nowhere.
why it's so important for people like Leslie to be doing what she's doing, trying to help fighters, get a fair shake, because I'm looking at this industry, and this industry, the mixed martial arts industry, it's exploding, and it's
Oh yeah.
only getting bigger. And what, right now we're living in an era where there's not much sports, and people are starved for sports. People love sports. They love competition. They love watching it. And the UFC is picking up a lot of new fans because of the simple fact that there ain't nothing else to watch, you know,
Right.
if for no other reason, and I'm looking at it, and I'm looking, yeah, they may be losing money right now a little bit, because they don't have the gates and the things like that, and they're having to come out of pocket for it. But the fact of the matter is, in the long run, they are not losing shit, and they can afford to pay, you know, the things that they need to pay, insurance and things of that nature for fighters, because I mean, it's a shame what's going on, because if a man is going to give his life to something that he is passionate about, then he should be compensated for it. That's just my
Yeah.
belief. I don't care what it is,
Yeah.
and that's where universal basic income is going to be so important in the future.
I agree. 100%. I agree 100%.
All right. So now that we've talked a long time about Andrew Yang, the campaign, we've covered just about every ground that we could possibly cover. Let's get into Fight Island. First of all, what are your thoughts on Fight Island? Because as soon as I heard it, I was just like, oh my gosh, it's the Kumite. It's going to be great. It's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah. Well, like I knew, so, Abu Dhabi, they can do a lot, right? So, the sheik there is a big fan of mixed martial arts, and so they can bankroll this, right? So we'll see. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting title and an interesting way to promote, Fight Island,
It
like
is.
Kumite.
It is. It's catchy because I grew up on movies like Bloodsport and
But Enter
Chuck
the
Norris
Dragon,
movies. Yeah, Enter the Dragon.
Enter
I
the
mean,
Dragon was,
that's
yeah,
they're great movies. And
yeah,
I think that's kind of where like the UFC kind of got sidetracked by people like McCain, because they also watched those movies, and that's what they thought that they were going to be seeing.
yeah. Yeah. Well, they actually, like the original UFC, like I heard a rumor that they were going to make a moat around the octagon and they were going to put like crocodiles inside it, And I was like, wow, like,
I mean,
you
that would
know,
have been epic. That's like mixing the UFC with the XFL.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't have any background in, in event promotion, but yeah, if you bring, people who want to see it, um, so yeah, like the idea of Fight Island, like okay, let's like I'm curious. Yeah, I was gonna watch it anyway, so I'm not gonna not watch it because of its Fight Island. Um, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how the promotion how it works. It's been interesting watching UFC lately with no audience members, right? And you can hear them in there. You hear like the punches and the kicks and the knees, and it has changed the sport as far as like from a viewing standpoint. So let's see. Let's see how they promote it. I'm curious to see how it plans out.
One of the things that kind of, it doesn't disappoint me, but I guess it kind of does. Dana, they moved from when they were at the apex, it was the 25-foot cage. And for Fight Island, they moved back to the 30-foot cage. Now, Dana, he's saying, like this doesn't have really any effect, but I kind of think it does, because when you close that distance, now all of a sudden it kind of forces the action a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it'll closing off the rings, right? Like it I'm not 100% sure, but it would seem like as an observer that you have to adjust your strategy as far as cutting off someone who's got great lateral movement. So, but I think like all of them know, right? So like like whether you're a grappler or striker or whatever your specialty is, you just have to make the adjustments, and we'll see. Yeah, like I think in a larger cage, the grappling, maybe is not as maybe it would be maybe tougher to grapple. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we'll see. Like I'm looking forward to seeing how they promote it, and how it looks.
It's going to be great either which way you
Yeah.
slice it, because we are in for one heck of a card, man. There are three title fights. Three
Yeah.
title fights on this card. If there's
Yeah.
ever a card, I know that the UFC is expensive and we are the broke folk vote. Man, if you like the UFC, this is definitely a card that you're going to want to tune into, because you've
Yeah.
got, first though, you got Rebus and Paige Van Zandt. Where do you stand on that one? Because I like both of those fighters, man. And Amanda's coming in at 9-1, and she might be Paige
I
might
saw
be
that
in for it.
I saw that Paige is like the biggest underdog. Did you see that?
It's
Like she's
crazy.
like, yeah, like she's like I think I wrote it down. Yeah, Rebus is -800. Van Zandt is +550. So she is a huge underdog. Um, I think when I've watched a few Paige Van Zandt interviews recently, where she said, and this is interesting because it kind of ties in what we were saying. She made way more money on Dancing with the Stars than she ever did in the cage. Did you happen to catch any of those interviews?
No, I didn't, but that's
Yeah.
so telling. I
Yeah.
mean, you're giving your life's blood to a sport and you just
Yeah.
made more on Dancing with the Stars? What?
Yeah. Yeah. And she said she loves fighting, but if you really, from an economic standpoint, I don't think it makes much sense for her to continue fighting.
No.
She said like she can also through like I don't she gets monetized through her Instagram, I guess, as well. And so she can make way more money just being monetized through Instagram and YouTube, Dancing with the Stars. So I think she's such an underdog because people maybe don't think that her heart can be in it anymore. Like, so I just want every fighter to be able to retire with dignity, right? And like Paige is still young, but she can, she has a great career ahead of her if she wants to pursue like other avenues, right? So she's a very marketable fighter, obviously. And so, yeah, I think, and I don't really know too much about Rebus. I don't really know too much about her. But when I saw that Rebus is such a favorite, I just hope that she comes out safely, and then, I would love for her to say, okay, thanks UFC, but I'm done. Like, so yeah,
So
I'm gonna have to
you're
go with
saying she
Rebus.
might retire her? She might
Well, yeah,
retire her tomorrow night.
yeah, like if Paige wins, then wow, like what a great story from,
Mhm.
because she was like a favorite for a while, right? She was winning and became, very popular and doing UFC commercials, and she's a highly marketable athlete. So like I will be rooting for her. I will be rooting for her. I want her to win. Um, but I'm rooting for her economic success as an athlete, right? So I don't feel confident she's going to win, but I'm rooting for her. That's where I
Right.
stand on
Okay. So don't bet on Paige. Got it. Paige, we love you, but we understand you have much bigger fish to fry elsewhere.
that.
And that's kind of the way it goes. I mean, just look at like Ronda Rousey and,
Right.
the career that she had. She was skyrocketing, and then she realized, hey, you know what? I can make a lot more money going somewhere else, and I can't get beat up all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
Second fight of the night, Jessica Andrade and Rose
And
Namajunas.
yeah, Rose. So I'm a fan of Rose.
I am
Um,
too.
yeah, I mean, she's tough as nails. I saw one of her. I'm not sure what it was. One of her first fights, she won with the flying armbar, and she knows. Like I don't know her personally, but I know that some of my teammates do. That she's. I'm not sure if she's trained with them or like hangs out in certain circles, but she's just like kind of quiet and modest and tough as nails, and like those are the type of fighters that I like. I
Now,
know that this is a rematch, right?
yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, I may have this wrong, but isn't she the one that fought? What's that one lady? Uh, she said that she was going to bully her. She was going to bully her all the way across the octagon.
Like, yeah,
And
yeah,
Jason,
the Croatian fighter. I forget her name.
yeah, exactly. And then Rose
Yep.
come out and she was like, "Okay, you gonna bully me? You gonna bully me? You gonna talk all that shit?" And she come out and I mean, she dominated. To me, she just like put the hurt on her.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I kind of like that because
yeah. Well, and also if you see, like Rose has also talked about retiring. You know, like she, like I don't know at what level like her heart can be in it anymore either. Like again, I'm going to be rooting for Rose. She is the favorite, right? Minus 200. But this is a rematch. So Andre, beat her with that slam, right? So she got knocked out with a slam by Andre. So I know that that's going to be in the back of Rose's mind. But I think that she wins this one. I think Rose is going to win this one. I think she learned her lesson from that fight, and if she again, like she could be another one to win and retire. You know, like she might be like, okay, this is enough. Like I think as again, she's a wonderful athlete, but the whole like the way in which the UFC is promoting, like I don't think she's like 100% comfortable with the way things are going. Um, but I'm gonna go with her. I'm gonna go with Rose on this one.
it sounds like you think that there's a lot of fighters who are kind of disenchanted with the way things are going. Is
Oh
that
yeah,
kind
well,
of
Nick said like I don't like fighting. Like if you ask like Nick and Nathan Diaz both have said they don't really like fighting. Like Nick said if he could get the same amount of money by doing triathlons, he would. Like they can both Nick and Nate can make a lot of money by showing up at cannabis shops, across the country. So these athletes now have multiple avenues of revenue, and at this point, like this is like a big thing. Like I know when we get to the Usman fight, well, I'll just tell you about what I thought about what Nathan. The reason why, like, I'm really hoping for Masvidal win, and I mentioned this on Twitter to you,
mm-hmm,
is Masvidal wins, right? And now he's the champ.
mm-hmm.
So who is he going to fight? He already said he wants to give Nathan a rematch, right? So Nathan now has another huge payday coming up if Masvidal wins, and then my dream scenario is Nathan beats Masvidal, gets the UFC belt, gets his BMF. Remember the BMF belt, right? And so he winds up with two belts, and then Joe Rogan interviews him, and Nathan gives him the UFC belt and says, "I'm done, I'm out of here," and walks out with the BMF belt and retires.
That would be such that scenario right there, dude. That would fly into the face of everything corporate because for a long time, especially the Diaz brothers, man, they have been getting the short end of the stick when it
Oh
comes to
yeah.
the UFC. And I don't know, because there's probably a lot going on that I don't know about. But man, it just seems to me like looking on from the outside that they've gotten the short end of the stick a lot.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like especially like in like the mid 2000s, this is 15 years ago or so. I mean, we lost so many close decisions and decisions that could have gone either way, and of course, Dana actually, you know, I don't see like if you are a fight fan, I don't see how you could not like Nick Diaz, you know, and
Mm,
Nathan, and basically
absolutely.
our entire Gracie Fighter team. Um, you know, you hear about a lot of fight teams. You know, fighters move and they go to different camps, and like our fight team has stayed together. You know, and they would never fight each other. I know one interview person, like almost, I felt bad for this interview because someone asked like who they thought would win between Nick and Nate, and I'm like, do not ask that question because that is an off limit question. You like that's the type of question that you should probably walk out because you know you're in danger of getting hurt. So,
Yeah,
but
that's
because you would never, even when in Strike Force, when I think I know Nick had a Strike Force belt and Jake had a Strike Force belt, and someone had asked um, Nick, "Well, what if you and Jake?" He says, "I will never fight Jake," and he's like, "I'll be happy being number. If Jake is the champion, he's like, I will be happy in the number 2 spot." You know, and nobody says that these days. You know, even like Usman and Masvidal, like they were both part of American Top Team, and but the Gracie Fighter team is just right. It's just the loyalty that we have on the team is it's really beyond compare. But anyway, okay, I'm sidetracking you. I know I'm looking at the
do
time. I'm like,
not ask who would win between the Diaz. Got it. Okay. First title fight of the night. You know what? You're laughing, but like I really wondered like who would win between those two. Because they are so spectacular at what they do, and I admire both of them. It's kind of natural to wonder like, you know, which way it might
well,
go.
so Nathan was always like the younger brother, you know, and like you know, in any family, like the younger brother is the one who kind of gets teased a little bit. Like I went, you know, like mountain biking with Nathan, and remember him saying that Nick had scheduled a mountain bike with a bunch of people and told everyone to show up at this one
Oh no.
spot, and then Nathan, well, there we go, and and Nathan was able to you know, kind of stand in Nick's shadow and watch him and watch the way in which Nick held himself in the, you know, in the cage, in the octagon, in the ring, you know, as a martial artist, as a human being. So Nathan learned so much from Nick. And you know, Nathan has mentioned multiple times that you know Nick Diaz is the greatest martial artist that ever lived, and I agree. Like Nick is an obscure genius. You know, it's like the way in which he was able to you know deal with the media, even though like he had you know he has like some social anxiety. You know, so it wasn't he never really wanted to talk. Right, it was fight week, and like you could see, like he's always like annoyed, like didn't know what to say, but then like he found his voice. You know, Nick found his voice, and people who are true fans of the sport, you know, have to respect what Nick did for the sport. Nathan was always like just like joking around, like having fun, and Nick was taking all of the you know, like Nick was standing in front, you know, taking all the damage, and so that Nathan could have the success that he did. Um, you know, and when the Conor McGregor fight came up, after that fight, people were like, "Oh, who is Nate Diaz?" We're like, "Dude, man, like you don't even know. You don't know. Like he's been doing this for so long. You know, we've been doing that team. The Nick and Nate have been doing this for so long, and like I'm thankful to McGregor. You know, like I'm like he made my friend a lot of money. You know, like Nick or Nate was fighting for you know good money, but not McGregor type money, you know, and then he got 2 fights back to back, you know, McGregor type money, and then and then Nathan calling out. He didn't even really call out Masvidal. he just said, look, I like the way Masvidal fights. And, you know, the BMF belt was created because of Nathan, right? And Masvidal right now is getting a lot of the attention because of what Nathan did for him. So I know Masvidal is a stand-up guy, so that's why, like, I want him to win. And then when he's in the octagon and they ask him who he wants, I think he's going to ask for Nathan. You know, I think that's the best fight for him. That's the best fight for the sport, for the fans. I'm getting sidetracked. Sorry, Russell.
It's okay, man, because I listen, I can sit here. I honestly, I can sit here and talk about this all day, literally, and I never get to, or I hardly get to. So it's so enjoyable for me, especially to hear your perspective, because you are so close to everybody in the sport, and it's wonderful to hear a perspective, you know, that's not from the outside, that's actually from the inside, and it's very much appreciated.
Yeah,
So now we
I
come to our first title fight of the night.
yeah.
Okay, this one's going to be huge because you got Peter Yan, right, against Jose Aldo. And
Yeah.
everybody knows that Jose has been a monster in this sport for a long time. And,
Yeah.
you know, it kind of frustrates me to hear people talk about, you know, when a fighter loses a fight or two that they're done. And it's just like, man, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah. So this one, so I didn't like Jan. Like I wound up watching some of his fights recently. Like last night, I was like, okay, let's check this guy out. So he's got great boxing and movement, and he's got good wrestling defense. Like I'm going with Aldo on this one, even though I think Aldo is also he's the underdog again. So Aldo is the underdog, but I think that Aldo's got better wrestling. I think he's got more of a killer instinct. I think Jan is he's very technical, right? He's a good fighter and he stays within his game. You know, he's a good counter puncher, good, you know, great boxing skills. Um, but I just have a feeling that Aldo like really wants this one. You know, like he wants to get that belt back. And now that Cejudo, there's another guy that retired, right? Another retired.
Yeah.
Um, I think that Aldo really wants this one. And although Jan is like a good technical fighter, and he still is the favorite, you know, and I obviously respect him, you know, respect his skill set. I think Aldo is going to just crack him one, you know, and that's going to put him in trouble. And this is 5 rounds, right? It's a championship. So
Yeah,
it's
they're all
5 rounds.
title fights, so 5 rounds.
Yeah. So I'm going with Aldo on that one.
You know, I saw the weigh-ins, and Jose, man, he had a look in his eye like he was just crazy. You know, I mean, it's been a while since I've seen that look. And I think he's going to come out and he's going to be, like you said, he's going to be very intense. But I think that this is going to be the tell-off, you know, for Jose Aldo. If he wins this fight, I feel like he's going to, you know, he's going to go on to do some good things. But I feel like if he loses this fight, because there's already controversy, right, about him having a title shot and being on a 2-fight losing streak in another weight, you know, one was in another weight division, you know, so people are kind of like, well, why is he getting a shot? But the fact of the matter is, you know, it's hard enough for the UFC to be doing this during what we're going through.
Right.
So when you have top flight talent who's willing to step up and take these fights, and you know, you make the card because it just makes sense. You can't, you know, the time for belly aching is over, you know, and we're going to talk about that a little bit when we get to the Masvidal fight, because that's something I wanted to mention there. So you think Jose takes this one, and I'm kind of with you on that one.
Yeah.
But I do think that this will be the tell-all fight for Jose.
Yeah, I think so. Jose's got a pretty good blast double. It's like I'm hoping that Aldo wants to wrestle him. So, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to that fight.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to on one of these big cards that are coming up. We're gonna have to do an actual fight companion because I think that would be fun as hell to do a
Yeah,
fight companion.
let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, the co-main event of the evening: Alexander Volkanovski against
Yeah.
Max Blessed Holloway.
Yeah.
Man, this
Okay.
one's tough.
It's a tough one, and Holloway is also the underdog. I'm gonna go with Holloway on this one, even though like I know he's had a hard weight cut. Like some of like the press that's coming out, like where's his head? I'm not sure where his head is at the moment. Um, Volkanovski, like he is also an amazing fighter, kind of like Jan, and like he's super technical, stays within his game. I think in the last fight, like he outpointed him. He outpointed Holloway. So just like the Aldo fight, I think Holloway is going to have to come out with some aggression, which like Holloway also kind of like he kind of stands on the outside, picks you apart, and he's got a lot of heart. Um, so I think this is also it's going to be a close one. I know Volkanovski is the favorite. I can see why people think that he's going to win.
Yeah, because his face looks like it's cut out of granite. That's why
Yeah,
people are picking him.
yeah, and also to be honest, like I'm not like the best in picking fights. And people ask me like
At
they think
least
like
you're honest.
yeah,
I mean,
like
you
I
did say that you like to go for the underdog a lot, and I'm kind of the same
like
way. So maybe we might not better bet on these.
well, even when I was with in Iowa when I was talking with Andrew the night that McGregor and Cowboy had the fight. So we were
Uh-huh.
in Iowa when that fight took place. And during the day before the fight, we were talking and he said, "Who do you have?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm thinking Cowboy for some reason." He's like, "Oh no, McGregor's gonna win this one." And I'm like, "All right, we'll see." And then the next day I'm like, "Yeah, you were right." So
That's because, man, look, listen, if you can count on Cowboy to do anything, is that he's gonna choke when it comes to the really big fights, man. He never has done well. It's almost like when everybody counts him out, he does wonderful. And he just goes in there and he puts on performance after performance after performance. But as soon as he actually gets in that main spotlight, it's just like, oh shit, here we go again.
yeah, so yeah, I tend to just like I go for who I'm rooting for. Like Rose. Okay, she's a little bit of a favorite, so I did pick her, even though she lost to Andre before. Like Aldo's is an underdog. Holloway is an underdog. Masvidal is underdog. I'm going
We
almost
see a
all.
theme here.
Yeah, Paige Van Zandt is a huge underdog. Like, yeah. See the pattern?
I do, absolutely. I think, I don't know, man. I think that Alexander, I think he's going to remove all doubt. I really do. I think
Yeah.
he's going to go in there, and I kind of feel like he's going to punish Holloway. As much as I would love to see Holloway win because I'm such a fan and have been for a long time. I mean, the dude's skill set is just nuts.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know, man. Alexander's just on a hot streak, and it's going to be tough to derail that train.
Did you see Holloway's bottle cap challenge video?
I
Did you ever see?
didn't.
Remember when Andrew and
Yeah.
Tyree did the bottle cap challenge? So he had in my opinion, the best bottle cap challenge because he did the spinning back kick and he barely tipped the cap and it spun and it spun and it spun and then it stopped right on top. It didn't actually come off. It was pretty cool.
Precision. That's nuts.
Yeah, it was
Now,
cool.
there's been a lot of question about Andrew's bottle cap challenge because there
Yeah.
has been some people who were wondering if that bottle was like held down or what was going on with that bottle. So we're gonna have to ask Andrew about
Yeah,
that.
we'll ask him.
So you ain't spilling no beans then.
No, 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 no. Tyrene's was better. I know that Tyrene Pamstein, like her bottle cap challenge was like the best.
Hey, talk about a beast, man. She is just
Yeah, so
like crazy physical.
Yeah, so her son, Minnie Yang, was
Hmm.
my kindergarten student. So that's
Really?
yeah. So I was the one who introduced Tyrene to Andrew Yang.
No kidding. Oh my gosh, man, this is crazy. Like the intricacies of like the Yang Gang and like how we all just like coalesced into this movement behind this random dude who come out of nowhere. It's just nuts, man. It's just nuts, and
Yeah.
it's so beautiful to see because it lets you know that there are a lot of people who care about humanity first and the vision that Andrew was trying to put forward. And I'm gonna tell you what's the truth. Andrew has done more since he stopped running for president than any of the politicians in
Yeah.
Washington. How crazy is
Yeah.
that?
I know. Yeah. So people would ask me like, oh, like, what am I doing? I'm like, well, I'm still volunteering for Andrew. Like, I'm not stopping. I'm with Humanity Forward, and whatever they need me, or in any way that I can be helpful, I plan to continue. 100%.
Look, see, we got derailed again on Andrew Yang. How crazy is that? We can't get through even the whole fight card without talking about Andrew. That's great. Main event of the evening, the Nigerian Nightmare and Game Bread. I think, okay, so first of all, and this is something that we alluded to earlier. Masvidal turned this fight down twice against
Right.
Usman because he didn't feel like the money was right. And
Yeah.
at first blush, when I first heard it, I'm like, man, you're fighting in a main event of the evening in the UFC, and you're belly aching about how much money. Come on, man. I'm out here paying $60 for the freaking pay-per-view. The least you can do is go in there and fight. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then you stop and you think about like how poorly a lot of these fighters are treated and how like this is literally their livelihood. They are potentially facing death every time that they go into that
Yeah.
by a strange shot just landing the wrong way or for whatever reason, and then their families are left without. So you know what? Yeah, Masvidal, get all that money. Get
Yeah.
absolutely every dime out of those tightwads that you possibly can, and I'm cheering for you, man. I think Usman wins this fight, but I am really seriously rooting for Masvidal. And if
Yeah.
Masvidal does win, you have to like help set up an interview with Nate.
I'll ask him. Yeah, I asked him today. I told him that I was going to be on here today. And also, just to be clear, so when I met Nate in 2004, and he was still a teenager at that time. And then as they got more and more famous, like they moved on. They moved out to Stockton, and they kept. So like over the past, it's not like I'm training with him every single day, but I do train with him. Like he's come out to support me at my tournaments, and my competitions, at a Fight to Win competition. He actually wound up. He was at a school fundraiser, like randomly. So like he's done a lot like for me, and I support him 100%. It's just like once they kind of like in the late 2000s, before 2010, he he once they got famous, they got to go off. Like they don't need a kindergarten teacher as a sparring partner that much anymore. Like they they need to get like the real good sparring partners. But I always like to tell people too that I'm Caesar's 5th black belt, and Nathan is number 6. So
Wow,
he's
that's
right
pretty incredible stuff.
behind
And
me.
I mean, I've had okay. I love all the UFC fighters, and first and foremost, because I just think that they're awesome at what they do, and to be in the UFC or any of the other uh, organizations is a testament to their skill and the time that they put in. But I've always been a fan of four guys the most in the entire history of the UFC, and one was Hoist Gracie because of just, I mean, he was and still is, the biggest to me the biggest icon in the sport. He helped build the UFC, and then there
Yeah.
was John Fitch, because I just love John Fitch, because he would go in there and he would just get on you and smother the shit out of you, man. And those fighters would look so irritated when they had to fight John Fitch because he just kept on them, kept on them.
John
And then there
Fitch.
was
Yeah.
Conor
I was just gonna
McGregor.
say,
Well, to me, he's the next icon. But then there was Nate Diaz. He's always been one of my favorite UFC fighters because of just the way he carried himself. And he was always that one, man. He didn't give a fuck. He would get in that ring, and the fight where he had dude yoked up in his legs and he was sitting there like this right
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude. I think I screamed and woke everybody in the house up. I was like, yes.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
talk about John Fitch for a second. Dude was just
Yeah.
amazing.
So I met John Fitch in 2005, and I was a blue belt, and I was at a tournament, and he had a super match in that tournament against Jake Shields,
Oh
and
wow.
so I was. It was just a grappling match, and you can look it up. It's on YouTube. Jake Shields versus John Fitch grappling, and I remember Jake saying, "Okay, like he's a good wrestler," and Jake submitted him. Jake submitted him that day, and so he was, American, I think, AKA American Kickboxing Association out of San Jose. So he was a local guy, and yeah, and he wound up. I had was it last year or 2 years ago? I had a fight to win match, and it's a professional grappling competition, and John Fitch was my referee. So,
Oh wow. How
so
crazy is that?
they didn't tell us who the refs were going to be, but so I go out there, and so it's a big production. They had like strobe lights and fog machines and loud music, and I'll show you. I'll send it to you. You'll see. And then like I come out, I'm like, hey, John Fitch. I shake his hand like he was the ref. I wound up losing that match, but it was a good experience.
That's crazy. I think I would be starstruck just being around any of them. You should have seen me the first day that I met Andrew Yang was in a hot field in South Carolina. It was before the Clyburn Fish Fry.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think it was like a couple weekends before that. And Andrew's standing out there in the hot sun and he's got a suit on. And I'm like, dude, I'm like, because I'm from the South, man. I know how hot it gets. And I'm trying to wear as little clothes as possible. And he's out there in a suit and he's not even breaking a sweat. And I look at my wife and I'm like, it's Andrew Yang. It's really Andrew Yang. He's like, right over there. And we had got there a little bit late. And I guess everybody who had wanted to speak to him, there weren't very many people there. This was back in the early days. And I went up and I was like, can I talk to Andrew Yang? And there was this dude there and he was like, well, let me see, turns out that dude that I was talking to was Jermaine Johnson.
Jermaine,
And
yeah.
and he was like, he went and asked Andrew if he would take a minute. And Andrew was like, yeah, absolutely. And I was stuttering, I couldn't think of anything to say. And I told him that, I was a Trump supporter in the last election cycle, a lifelong conservative, always been a Republican. And I heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I was going to vote for him because he made so much sense. He is like, wow, here's this dude who is finally talking about the things that affect me every day. Because I'm 45 years old, and I'll be honest with you, it hasn't mattered who the fuck has been president because ain't none of them had my best interest at heart. They've just done their thing, and I've kind of done my thing. And it's
Yeah.
almost like we live in two separate worlds. But in actuality, the government is supposed to serve the people. And when Andrew spoke, and he spoke on all of those things, and he unpacked that, hey, you know what? It's automation that's stealing our jobs. It's not immigrants. You hear Trump talking about build the wall because we got immigrants coming in taking our jobs. But low information people hear that and they're like, yeah, screw those immigrants coming in taking our jobs. Damn them. Why I got to struggle here in America when the immigrants are coming in and they're getting all the money? And that's the line that the conservatives push. That's their little narrative that they push. And the left has their own narrative, I found out since I've been over here as a Democrat. they're just as corrupt too. Because in the end, all of these people are serving the same corporate masters. They all work for the same corporations. The same corporations are funding both sides. And until we get away from this whole left-right dichotomy, it's just going to continue to perpetuate itself. And when you hear Andrew Yang talk about, you know what, if we do this thing called democracy dollars, and this is what sold me on Andrew Yang, and I wanted to, I will vote for Andrew Yang 100 times over just on that one policy, because money has corrupted our government systems. And if you put democracy dollars in everybody's hand and you wash out that corporate money, it's a done deal. They lose all their power because now the Congress people are listening to the people again. They're hearing what the broke folk are saying. Our lives, most of us can't afford that unexpected bill, like Andrew was talking about. And now during this time of crisis, we're seeing, they're giving Nancy Pelosi's husband PPP bailouts, and I'm sitting here and I'm looking at a $1,200 smack in the face, and I'm like, we should vote every one of these people out.
I'm with you.
That was my rant. Take over, Bill.
No, like I think what you're saying is absolutely true, and I think it's interesting in some of the circles that I speak in and hanging out with, when someone says, "Oh, there's no way that a Trump supporter could support Andrew Yang," and I'm like, "Oh man,
I converted my whole family. My whole family was voting for Andrew Yang."
Yeah, and if you think about like what our country needs at the moment, in my opinion, is we need to come together, right? So a person like Andrew is the person who could do it. Unfortunately, we don't have that option on this election cycle, but we're here for the long game, and even like Andrew says that like he never wanted to become president. It's just he wants to make the world a better place, right? And since no one is doing what he thinks needs to get done, he's taken it upon himself. With, again, just like the fighters in the UFC, Andrew put himself in the cage, right? In the political cage. And he's taken hits, like he's made great sacrifices.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to just support him, just like I support Nate and Nick and Leslie, like he's my teammate, and we all have a role to play. And, my role coming up is to be in the classroom, and to help little kids learn how to read. And I'll still make phone calls for Humanity Forward and still try to get grants out to people who are suffering, in this really tough economic time. Oh man, it's rough, and I think one of the, like, an important skill, and you've got kids, right, Russell? You've got kids?
I do, yes.
Yes. So, one of the things that you learn when you train jiu-jitsu and kickboxing, or mixed martial arts, or martial arts in general, is you have to learn to take some hits, and keep going. And like I recommend jiu-jitsu training for everybody, and the lessons that you learn, go way beyond learning how to defend yourself. You learn how to be a teammate. You learn how to, like, my role, if I were to ever, when they were fighting, and they looked at me like in the late 90s, like Dave Terrell, who is one of the, the most incredible fighters I've ever met. He's looking to me as like, I'm going to help him get ready for a fight. And I'm thinking, like, I'm a grade school teacher. Like, but if that's what my role is today, is to help you get ready for a fight, then that's what I'm going to do. And then when Andrew said, "Look, I need you to help me drive this vehicle behind the bus," I'm like, "All right, I'm in there." And like, "I need you to make some phone calls for Humanity Forward." I'll do it. Like, let's have a fundraiser. Let's do a rally. Like, whatever your role is, I think like martial arts prepares you for that, because you never know what's going to happen in a fight, right? You never know what's going to happen in a fight. And me going back to school next month, we don't know what's going to happen, right? Like, who knows what's going to happen with education this year? It's going to be rough. But my martial arts training, I feel, has prepared me. Like, I'm ready. Like put me in, coach. Like, give me an opportunity to be successful in this very difficult time. So I know I'm getting you sidetracked, but
It's
like
okay, because I was just sitting there thinking about, in dealing what we're dealing with. I don't know how they're going to open schools, to be honest with you. Yeah, young people aren't as affected by what's going on. And I keep saying by what's going on because if I say what's going on, YouTube will demonetize me. But man, that's scary because a lot of those kids are going to go back home to, parents and grandparents who are susceptible. And
and my
I just,
colleague, I have a lot of teacher colleagues that have compromised immune systems, right? And we don't, like, we have to ask parents for hand sanitizer and paper towels and soap and tissues, like all the things that like our district just doesn't supply us with. Like, we're not going to get any gloves. I hear I'm getting a face shield.
oh, wow.
But
Congratulations.
yeah, I know. But can you imagine like the amount of like cleaning supplies and custodial, help we're going to need? And what about like the resource teachers? What about kids with autism? How am I going to stay socially distant from a kindergartner with autism? Like, that doesn't I'm willing, like, I don't want to get sick either, but like, at least, I'm healthy and I have a good immune system, but I don't want my colleagues getting sick. I don't want even if my colleagues aren't, don't have compromised immune systems, they go home and they're taking care of a parent. I have a friend, colleague, she's like 55, and her parents are like in their mid 80s, and their parents need help. So how is she going to help her parents, with compromised immune systems, when she's putting herself at risk by going into a classroom? And we just need more time. Like, we're planning on going back, like August 13th. I'm planning on having kids in the classroom, like half the group one day and half the group the next. But it just hurts when, you've got the leader of your country saying something like, you better go back to school or we're not going to fund you. I'm like, dude, you haven't been funding us. Like,
Right?
I have been funding myself. I put in about, like $800 to $1,000 of my own money every year into my classroom. Sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. And then I get money from parents, our PTA. I've got people giving me, older computers and different iPads. I mean, like, we're scrounging around, trying to give an opportunity for kids to have the best education possible. So we just need a little help, and we could use some leadership at the top.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that is something that's in very short supply. And it sucks because, I see it and I guess I understand it. Election year, we got to make sure that the economy is moving back in the right direction. But, what they're failing to realize is we are that economy. And it's like you said, teachers have been getting screwed for years and years and years. We can find plenty of money for the military industrial complex, but my gosh, you ask for a teacher to be able to afford a fucking ruler, and it's like, where are we gonna get the money? How are we gonna finance a fucking ruler? Are you kidding me? We can't finance a ruler. You want a bomb? If you want a bomb, we'll give you a bomb. But if you want a ruler, you show it, bro. I mean, that's crazy. I can remember when I first moved to Vermont, right? I went into a little Dollar General, and there was a lady standing there, and I had my stuff in my arms, and I'm like waiting to check out, and she's like stressing over getting a receipt from the cashier for a $20 purchase of what she was going to use as school supplies, because if she didn't have that, then the school wasn't going to reimburse her for the supplies. And I'm like, please let me pay for that. I was like, I don't care. Take the receipt back to the school too and double dip. Let me pay for it, because you are a teacher. You should not be worried about getting a $20 receipt. But the fact that you are is an indictment not only on the school system, but the government, who has been cutting the funding of the school system for how many years?
Exactly. Exactly. Thanks for your support, Russell. I appreciate it.
Bill, I guess that's a good spot, and we're just going to wrap it up right there. I want to thank you so much for being a guest on this show, and I feel like we could probably do some more shows together, because I feel like we like to talk about the same things.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
If you're open to it, I'm open to it, and we can do it again, and maybe we can get a fight night going on. Any last words for the Yang Gang before you get out of here? Or anybody UFC fans who might be watching?
Yeah, well, just like Leslie, I know is going to maybe come on. I want to support all of my teammates. Nate, Nick, Jake, all of the Gracie fighters, Cesar Gracie, all these people that have really made my life just that more rich. Like my students, and for the Yang Gang, like, let's just keep fighting. Like, we know the direction that we need to head in, and I know people have different routes which they think are the best way to get to that spot. But let's just stick together. Let's stick together. Let's keep fighting. And Andrew Yang, thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate
Absolutely
what you do for me in this country. 100%.
For sure. Bill, thank you so much for being on the show today.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Take care. I'm going to get ready for those fights. There you have it. UFC fans who might be tuning in and watching this before the fights, or our grassroots Yang Gang family. I know it was a diversion from our usual course of action, but it kind of all ties in, because Bill has been such an integral part of the Andrew Yang campaign for such a long time, and the efforts that he's still continuing to put in, not just on the Andrew Yang front, but on the humanity first front in general. And that speaks volumes as to the kind of character that he possesses. And we want to thank him so much. Yang Gang, we love you. We hope you enjoyed the show. See you on the next one.